It's a first on this On the Mark podcast. We have a Yogi, a yoga instructor. There he is. If you're watching on YouTube, I recommend you do because he's going to show some stuff. Carter Miles, welcome to the On the Mark Golf podcast, man. How are you? Welcome.
I'm fantastic. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me.
It's my pleasure. Okay. Open disclosure. I found you on Instagram, and I found you on Instagram because for the last 2 months, maybe a little longer, I've been cold plunging. And the guys from Cold Plunge showed a video of you in the water that I was like, this is brilliant. I howled with laughter the way you did it. And I'm like, this guy is too good. I have to introduce him to the world. So I appreciate what you do, man.
Fantastic. I'm glad that that was the reception of that video, because when I was recording it and posting it, I thought like, is this a little aggressive? It's like it's a little aggressive, but like kind of funny. But it's good to find the humor in things like cold plunging that is so challenging and so intense.
I want to talk about that some because, in fact, I want to find it and I want to read a quote of yours back to you, and then I'm going to use
Okay.
it to kind of allow you to describe yourself. And you write here, yoga for the body. Approach it as a health practice, intentioned and designed to restore, integrate, and develop the various pieces and systems of the body into a more harmonious and highly functional whole. And I was like, hell yeah, sign me up. So for our global audience, please tell us about you. Tell us how you got to where you are.
Yeah, fantastic. How I got to where I am, I kind of put like the long story is when I was younger, I wasn't very healthy. I wasn't very active. I wasn't very good at sports. I kind of started playing a lot of video games and let my body go. And, you know, at a certain point, you start to care about the way that you look. So I started getting into the gym. I started reading Men's Health. I started learning how to work out. And that was like my introduction to what we might call yoga, which has a lot of different definitions to it, like what goes by the name of yoga. One definition that I like to work with is the harmonization of the body. So restoring health, developing the different systems of the body and integrating them together so that they're working together. And my introduction to that was working out. And then that helped me feel a little bit better. And it gave me a little bit of creative control in my life, because it was like, something that I can actually like do and work with, right? And it's responsive to me. Then I got into Buddhism and meditation. So the idea that you could make yourself not just healthier, but like happier, you could start to work with your mind as well. And then I found yoga kind of accidentally. I went into a yoga studio. I had known about it, but hadn't sought it out. And I loved the teacher. I loved the practice. I loved the way it made me feel. And it became this kind of natural synthesis of those two things, a practice that's for your body and is also for your mind. And it just drew me in. I loved the way it made me feel. So I just kept going back. And then I wanted to understand it better. So I did a teacher training, and then I did another teacher training. I traveled to India. I did trainings there, studying breathing, studying diet according to the yogic perspective, studying the whole yogic metaphysics, which, like I said, what goes by the name of yoga is very, very, very grand. You could say it's like the largest and the smallest is all addressed in the yoga philosophies. But it worked, and it made me feel good. And so I just kept coming back until I got to a point where I was kind of at a crossroads of what do I want to do with my life. And it was just so obviously good and valuable and helped me be better. And so about maybe 4 years ago or so, I just devoted myself to it completely, and that became my full-time thing.
Yeah. Okay. I have hundreds of questions are spinning in my head. So I'm going to try and arrange these a little bit. First off, because I guess I'll be honest with our fans, they log on and they download this thing to get better at something. This whole conversation is self-serving to a certain extent because I've had a number of trainers. In fact, the most recent guy I've been working with saying to me, you need to go over and do a restore yoga class because my job takes me around the world and there's stress and stuff involved. So I'm asking questions from my point of view. And the first one is that, people are searching for the feeling good like you described there.
Hmm.
I hesitate. You caught me at that because sometimes I think so many of us are in the grind. You might be able to
Hmm.
understand this, but we don't really know what good feels like anymore. Does that make sense? So
Absolutely.
I almost want you to sort of help all the listeners and viewers here and go, all right, it's time. You've hit the catalyst. You've hit the crossroads here.
Yeah.
Feeling is going to feel like this. So can you describe that?
So just that state of being in a state but not recognizing that you're in that kind of state because that's just the normal,
Yeah.
right? I think that that's something I've experienced with so many, fill in the blank of what that state is, whether it's a state of anxiety or a state of tension or a state of lethargy. I think that's the case for a lot of people, and it could be that you've been that way since early childhood. Your
Mhm.
society kind of conditioned you into a certain way. You got tight and tense as a result of emotional or physical postures that just eventually that's who you are. You don't know any better. You know,
Yeah.
if you've gone through some trauma and you're always anxious and you don't even recognize that you're anxious because it's the air that you breathe, right? You don't notice it until it's not there anymore.
Mhm.
Um, Sorry, the question again.
No. You're sparing my mind. You've described it well enough there too, and you use the term the air that you breathe. That's
Yeah.
too because like what you describe and people looking for this feeling of good, I think sometimes we disguise that by I don't know watching movies or eating bad
Right.
food and all because we're all looking for that break from the humdrum of life, and so what you described as ideal. And then you talked about breathing and I said this to someone
Mm.
on this podcast the other day. I was like, it's amazing you don't live if you don't breathe. Yet
Yeah.
most of us don't breathe properly. Is my contention
Yeah.
off out of bounds, yeah, or not? And if so, would you describe?
Uh, Total agreement with that. And as someone who has had to like put a lot of work and puts time in every day to retraining my own breathing patterns, it's a hard one to change. Um, but the original question of just, I think something along the lines of just people being in a state and not even recognizing the state that they're in or that they could be in a better state,
Mm,
right? And that we get caught in the grind, we get caught in the momentums, we get caught in the patterns and the conditioning, and then we just kind of make the assumption like, oh, this is what life is.
yeah,
This is how it feels. This is that you can't expect anything better than just what it is currently today. But maybe we haven't had a role model who has showed us like how happy we could be or how calm we could be, or we haven't had someone look at us and talk to us and be like, oh no, I could make you much more flexible, or like, no, you could run marathons if you wanted to. I know this because I see the potential within you that you're not currently embodying or realizing, but it's there, and we would just need to tap it, right? And that's the point of a practice. The point of a practice, something that you do, whether it's once a week or once a day or twice a day. And especially with practice, you know, the more that you do it, the more you're going to become that thing that you're practicing. You eventually do become that thing and you do change, and you are the type of person who is flexible, who can touch your toes, whose breath is calm, who can run a marathon, or someone who wakes up with energy and wakes up really happy all the time. And I think that's the case for a lot of people, that they've accepted a state of being that is maybe subpar. Uh, and the question then of why, right? That might be a little bit more complicated. Why accept that?
it could
As
be.
opposed to, shoot for the moon. And like, how good can you feel? How fantastic can you feel? Like, do you want to feel like you're just in love all the time? And if you read scriptures, like whether it's yogic scriptures or some like Christian scriptures, like those realized people, they are like that. Like they're in
Yeah.
love all the time. They feel great all the time.
You truly are preaching, and you've dropped a lot of golfing terms there, unbeknownst to yourself. I think that have probably caught a whole bunch.
Subpar, I know that
Yes,
one.
subpar, you definitely nailed. But you talked about mobility and flexibility, which are big watchwords nowadays. And
Mm,
so I want to now dive in, and I'm going to kick this off with just like the mechanics of it. But I want to start with, you know, I'm sure a lot of business people watching this will be like, all right, I've been told to go and do yoga, but I'm so
yeah.
self-conscious, I'm so aware. I've gone to one or two classes, and I find myself looking more around at the people who look like they're getting to these places so easily. And here's me. And then the instructor's going, well, you've got to breathe. I'm like, exactly. Thank you. So could you
Yeah,
please
like,
yeah,
and it's really hard. Like, it's really,
yeah,
really hard. If you've got a lot of tension, just going and doing yoga shapes is really, really hard. You think it's just body weight, right? But it's not just body weight, it's body weight against elastic resistance. So just like if you took an elastic band and you tried to pull it, it gets really, really taut. Well, this is true of your muscles and your myofascial networks as well. So when you go into the range of motion in whatever direction, that elastic tension gets really, really taut. This is why it can be hard to hold your arms just straight up overhead. It might not even be possible to straighten the arms completely overhead. Or if you do, like, it might kind of pull up something else to compensate for that, right? And so these are the tension patterns that a lot of people live with, and you don't necessarily know it until you go to a yoga class and they put you in these yoga shapes, which show you where you're tense, right? And that's kind of like the beauty of the yoga shapes, is that they're designed to show you where you're tight, where you're weak, where you're not connected, and force you to deal with those things.
Okay, folks, I did prepare Carter before I hit record in this conversation to say, look, I'm going where angels fear already. I'm a golf instructor and you helping me. And so as as you're teaching, as you're helping me and the folks listening, I'm like, yeah. And I get it. And I'm going back to the genesis of the whole thing, going, all of us that are on pills for different stuff, and, it's all tightness and tension, that sort of thing. There is the origin of a whole bunch of sickness and just unhealthy lifestyle as well, right? If there's tension and all this lack of, I guess, release, for lack of a better term, across the body.
Yeah. So, and we can just kind of there's so many things that we can touch on, but just this one idea of tension, right? So tension usually builds up as a result of either physical postural patterns, right? So if you sit hunched over for a long time, eventually there's going to be more tension in your chest, more tension in your core and your hip flexor. So it's harder to open. It's also a result of emotional patterns or the result of injury. So if you have a specific injury, that's going to cause like a traumatic response where the body tightens up around to try to protect it, right? A protection response. Yeah. You could also say that in response to emotional stress, your body also creates a protection response. As far as this then creates problems down the road, so your body has figured out ways to move in a very intelligent way. Now, if you have a tension pattern that's like constantly pulling on that motion, it's going to derivate, one of the joints or the positioning of one of the bones. This could over time, like especially if you're taking a repetitive motion over and over and over and over again, which I know obviously golfers are, most professional athletes do. Very few professional athletes are non-repetitive, like movement pattern. People. So if you have a slight derivation and then you're constantly taking a motion through that derivation, eventually that's going to wear down the joint, right? So that can cause at first a lot of inflammation, a lot of pain. Eventually it can cause a tear. Eventually it can also cause it to like freeze and lock up. And that's going to be like a bigger protection response. So that's just like with a physical problem that could happen, or like a very acute physical injury that could happen as a result of tension. There's another piece of this would be that when you've got all this tension on your body, especially in certain areas, like, okay, if you have tension in your bicep, it's not the end of the world. It's not exactly a health problem, right? But if you have tension in your rib cage, like that actually is a pretty big problem. So now you've got all this tension on the ribs that is collapsing onto the lungs. Now the lungs can't take a full breath. So you get all these little tiny breaths, right? So a lot of people are breathing like, well, what is that? Yeah. It sounds like I'm about to have a panic attack. And that breathing pattern is going to cause anxiety emotionally in the nervous system. It's going to release adrenaline. It's going to release cortisol. It's going to increase heart rate. It's going to increase blood pressure. Like, these actually are health problems that will be, deleterious down the line, not just in okay, you have a shoulder injury, but, oh, like now you're hypertensive, right? You're susceptible to a heart attack. You're in a stress response state all the time, and now you've got these autoimmune issues, and they're like, we don't know where it came from. Like, it's a lot of it is related to stress. When we're in a stress state, we're not in a healing state. And the body isn't just healthy or not, it's constantly healing itself. It needs to constantly be healing and refreshing itself. It's part of the magic of life. It's constantly doing many, many, many different functions to make sure that everything's working well. When we're in a stress state, the body doesn't use its resources to heal. It uses its resources to defend against whatever situation there might be, right? But then we just let that inner system kind of deteriorate. So any number of issues can go wrong down the line from an overactive stress response.
Wow.
And then the third thing I'd say with tension, I like this analogy, is like, if you were to take like a hoodie and you put it in the dryer and then you take it out and it's all tight, right? And it's not comfortable. And what do? You like push out against.
Exactly,
yeah, right? Like you want room just to live. You get a little claustrophobic. So you've got like a sensory nervous system in your body that is being clamped down upon by this tension 24/7. And we were talking about like people don't necessarily know what state that they're in until it's different. I think a lot of people actually have this kind of sense of, call it anxiety, call it claustrophobia, or this kind of impending pressure upon them because their sensory nervous system literally has that from the tensions on their body. And is that necessarily a health problem? It's an emotional problem, which then again can cause all sorts of health problems. And that's just the tension piece.
Wow.
Right? Like that's just talking about tension.
Well, no, and what you've done is a tremendous sales job for folks to go, well, maybe I need to try some yoga, because I before we
For
dive
sure.
into the mechanics, I want to ask you this. It's never too late to start, right? Because the body,
No.
you've done a wonderful job of describing how it's either in the healing state or the stress state, but we can change this stuff. We're not destined to, stress living and medication and such. We can change these things.
Yeah. So the two things that I would recommend for like anyone and everyone, regardless of the age or the state that you're in, is breathing and restorative yoga practices.
All right.
So yeah, the restorative yoga practices, I think of it like, is this yoga practice more strength oriented or release oriented? And going for the things that are really release oriented. The purpose is not necessarily to get into a split or put your leg behind your head or do a full wheel pose. The purpose is just to get in a position where you feel tension and stay there. Not for like 5 seconds, but maybe for like 2 to 3 minutes, maybe 5 minutes even. So you get yourself into a shape. It's a relaxed shape. You don't have to put much effort into, and you just stay there for a few minutes and allow it to open. And that's very simple, and everyone can do that. And it might look different from person to person to person, right? But that very simple practice, you might call it restorative yoga, you might call it yin yoga, accessible to everyone.
All right. I want you to show one or two of those, and then folks can obviously follow you to find out more.
Yep.
I want you to show some of those shapes, but let's start with the breathing, because you've sort of set it up to say, okay, we can do these two things. You go there, you find yourself a restorative class, and it's non-invasive. You've got to get over yourself,
yes,
so you can focus on it. But breathing is such a big part of it, and I've discovered this more and more of late, and I find that I've obviously searched for stuff enough on social media that every time I flick the page, there's someone else talking about breathing. You have,
it's in the zeitgeist.
Yeah, you have in some of your posts as well. So talk about good breathing habits, because it's the origin of life.
Fantastic. So, and I like that you say that it's like the origin of life, and whether it's an oxygen breathing organism or a carbon dioxide breathing organism, like the kind of telltale sign of whether something is alive is it appropriating material from the not it, bringing it into it and utilizing it. Yeah. And that's essentially what breathing is. You're bringing stuff in, you're sending stuff out. And so long as you're doing that, like, you're going to stay alive. Now, as long as you're doing that, like, you're going to stay alive. But if you stop doing that.
By the way, folks, golf is secondary. We're going to stay alive first. All right, go for
it. First things first, stay alive and breathe, and then golf all that you want. Right. So proper breathing, as opposed to like breath work, because there's a lot of different ways to practice breath work. There's a lot of breath techniques, but proper breathing, the things that, let me say like what most people are doing right now, and then counter that with like what a proper or a natural breathing pattern would be. Because it's not just one thing, it's going to be dynamic and adapted to the situation, right? Because if you're just sitting still, it's going to be a little bit different than if you're like briskly walking. The pattern that most people have, and it's a result of posture and emotional state, is what influences the breath to be what it is most people are breathing very quickly. They're very small breaths. So it's like, it could be 20 or 30 breaths a minute. It's oftentimes through the mouth because their nose is blocked off, oftentimes because it isn't used that well. So you have these kind of quick, short breaths that you're taking over and over, and then it's kind of, and there's a lot of breaks in between where people like stop breathing. Right. So that's called apnea. People get it from sleep. There's something called email apnea these days that people are get it from being at the computer. But so it's a state where if you were to look at it on like a heart rate monitor, you're like, this person's heart rate is very high. Yes. Or to put a musical analogy to it, it's like acid jazz. It's just like going and it's chaotic and it's not rhythmic. Right? It's not rhythmic either. It's very fast paced. It's up, it's down, it's big breaths, it's small breaths, it's a lot of breaths. And then like it just stops. And you can imagine that your brain might be like, what the F is going on here? Yeah. What is happening? You're supposed to have this breath that's just constantly flowing, and it's just very jagged and sporadic.
Brain's response would be to, guess, kind of get fight or flight a little bit when you like that, because that is part of because the next thing you're all jacked up and adrenalized because of it.
The brain kind of assumes that is exactly the case, that something bad is happening, something dangerous, something unpredictable, something high energy, right? That's kind of, if you were to measure and graph someone's breath pattern and just look at it, you would just have this kind of intuitive understanding, like something's not right here. It doesn't look right. It doesn't look rhythmic. It doesn't look coherent. It doesn't look smooth. It doesn't look relaxed. It doesn't look like any of these things. And you can tell that just by looking at a graph.
Right.
So contrast that with what might be called like natural or proper breathing. First, it's through the nose. Always through the nose. The nose is the organ of respiration. It does all this work to filter and process and warm and humidify and cleanse the air before it hits the lungs. The mouth doesn't do any of this.
I'm going to interrupt. I'm naughty. Forgive me.
Yeah.
I think it might have been you. I read this. I was like, and it was written, the nose is for breathing and smelling. The mouth is for tasting and something else. And I was like,
speaking, maybe.
Yeah, I think it might have been you.
Yeah.
You was.
Mm-hmm. And so you can breathe through the mouth, but think of it as like an emergency system, right? You can get a lot of air through the mouth very quickly. So if you are running for your life, and let's look like real stress response, real survival situation, you're probably going to want to breathe through your mouth, right? If you need as much energy as possible to fight or to run, you're going to want to breathe through your mouth. But exercising, when we're thinking about exercising, we don't want to be going at 110% when we exercise. Very quick way to just like torch our system, cause an injury, cause stress. You don't recover quickly from that. So you don't want to be at 110% when exercising. This is literally survival situation that you would want to like use the mouth for breathing.
Yeah, when I stop with a Peloton ride,
yeah,
I'm like this, and then the instructor's going to me. They're like, well, breathe through your nose, and I'm like, holy shit, this is not happening.
Yeah,
but
hard.
But I've learned more and more. I mean, the cold plunging has sort of taught me to like get over the panic and and breathe in through the nose and hold and breathe out through the mouth, like you. Yeah.
And we can talk a little bit about when you're exercising, why is it hard to breathe through your nose? It's not because you don't have enough oxygen. It's just carbon dioxide buildup. There's more carbon dioxide in your body because your metabolism is increased than there is normally. And the thing that causes the feeling like take another breath is actually not lack of oxygen. It's just increased carbon dioxide. So it's kind of like a trick sensor that it tells you that you need more air. You don't actually need more air yet. But so part of what I do in training people's breathing is I slow down their breath and increase carbon dioxide tolerance, because that way they can breathe more slowly without having that kind of like, I need it, right? And then it just becomes more relaxed.
And the carbon dioxide tolerance, I'm sort of finding this too when I'm in the freezing pool, that when you hold your breath for a while, you start getting to that place where you sort of feel it in your neck a bit, and then you get
Mhm.
twitchy. Yeah, and you're like,
A little bit in the diaphragm.
exactly right. So that is,
These are the reflexes that you're. So these are the reflexes to take the next breath. And if you're holding your breath, you're suppressing the reflexes, but you'll feel when they kick on. And they kick on because your carbon dioxide levels have increased more than you're used to. It's not a dangerous amount, it's just more than you're used to. And people with a lot of anxiety, people who don't exercise much, or people who have asthma, very often have a very low tolerance for carbon dioxide, which means it's next breath, next breath, next breath, and next breath. And it perpetuates the cycle
yeah.
of carbon dioxide sensitivity and anxiety.
And to turn this
Yeah.
golf for the folks, because golf is this thing where people say they play it for relaxation, but it sends you through a myriad of emotions within an hour. And
Like any game.
like any game, exactly. It's like life, sort of. And then you find folks kind of panting a little bit, and then the golf term is they're choking because they're not oxygenated
Yep.
well enough. And then it's this kind of deal as opposed to just settling and breathing in and breathing out sufficiently, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Huh?
And let's talk about the psychology of breath in a moment.
Yeah, sure.
Right. So how the brain changes as a result of breathing patterns.
All right.
Let's go back to proper breathing. I'll finish that up real quick. So through the nose, because the nose actually filters, processes, cleanses the air in a very sophisticated way. The nose is not just like an open hole. It spins the air through these little turbines before it like sends it down through the throat. I think the amount of space that your sinus cavities take up is about a billiard ball right behind the nose.
All right.
And that's all just devoted to processing the air before it goes down to the lungs. Next thing would be the diaphragm. So the diaphragm is, for a lot of us, the biggest muscle in our entire body, and it's barely used. It's used at about like 10 to 20% capacity on the normal human. So you don't need to use the diaphragm muscle to breathe, but it is the only muscle whose only job it is to breathe. Every other muscle is ancillary. So the diaphragm is this big umbrella-shaped muscle sitting at the bottom of the rib cage. It separates the thorax from the abdomen. And when it pulls downwards, it creates a pressure differential, a negative pressure that then pulls the air in. Couple benefits of breathing from the abdomen or breathing from the diaphragm. One, you get better oxygen absorption because the bottom of your lungs are wider.
Okay.
So more surface contact for the oxygen to go through. The diaphragm, when it goes up and down, it'll stimulate the vagus nerve, which is a part of the parasympathetic or the calm part of the nervous system. So any diaphragmatic breathing is going to be naturally pacifying. In addition, the motion of the diaphragm, it assists the motion of blood flow. It takes some of the burden off of the heart. So we think the heart's the only thing that's pushing blood through, but the diaphragm is, again, creating a pressure differential in the heart that helps move blood through. Also helps move lymph through the body. So the lymphatic system, kind of the detoxification system, it's massaging out the digestive organs. So it keeps those areas circulated. It helps move waste through. It's a really important muscle that like a lot of people don't think about. And then as well, when it comes to sports, when we breathe down into the belly and at the same time, like squeeze, we create what's called an intra-abdominal pressure. It's really good for if you're lifting heavy things, or if like you were going to go take a golf swing, you kind of build this pressure and then use it in the motion, right? So you can kind of bring in some energy and then put it towards whatever you want.
I want to say this, correct me if I'm wrong. I'm spitballing here. A golfism is you'll hear the instructor go, engage your core. And most folks like, oh yeah, I've heard that, but they don't really know what they're doing. But, part of that diaphragmatic breathing is essentially engaging the core. Yes, no?
Yes, definitely. And it's a very important muscle of the core. A lot of times when people think of core, they think like just the abdomen muscles, which are definitely parts of the core, but the diaphragm would be considered part of the core. I would consider the intercostal muscles between the rib cage part of the core, the pelvic floor, definitely a part of the core, and the spine itself. Like there's nothing more core or central than the spine. And every motion, I remember reading this at one point that like if you were to just reach out your arm to grab a cup, before this arm moves, your spine engages. Because the mechanics of your body is smart enough to know that you need to stabilize the center before you reach anywhere.
Yeah.
So it's like always this first. And then the last thing I'd say about proper breathing, so through the nose, from the diaphragm, not that much. You really don't need that much air. Oh yeah, we're breathing like way more than we need. As far as getting enough oxygen, with the average breather who doesn't necessarily have the greatest breathing patterns, like 75% of the oxygen that comes into the lungs goes out of the lungs.
Fascinating.
There's just a lot of oxygen in the air, way more than we actually need. When we breathe more slowly, we allow a buildup of carbon dioxide in our body. We often think of carbon dioxide as a waste gas. That's kind of what we're taught in like middle school, high school biology, is like oxygen good, carbon dioxide bad, get rid of it. Carbon dioxide is actually a super important molecule in the body. And so taking the path of oxygen through the nose, into the lungs, into the blood, and then to the cells, because that's where it needs to go, right? It needs to get delivered from the blood into the cells. The cells metabolize it and use it for energy, fuel. What causes the blood cells to release the oxygen, because the blood cells, the hemoglobin in the blood cells, it will grab the oxygen and then release it.
Okay.
It releases it in the presence of carbon dioxide.
Interesting.
So the more carbon dioxide you have in your body, the more oxygen is actually released into the cells. So if you're going like hyperventilating like crazy, and if you see someone have an asthma attack or a panic attack, they're like, I can't breathe. It's all you're doing is breathing. Why do you feel like you can't breathe? Well, the cells are suffocating. They are not getting oxygen. Their lungs are full of oxygen. Their blood is full of oxygen, but it's not being released because all that breathing is dumping all the carbon dioxide out of their body. And so there's a cellular suffocation that's happening. And what do? Oh, well, you might give them a bag to breathe into. What does that do? Carbon dioxide out, right back in.
Oh, got you.
Right?
Man.
Wild, right?
Yeah. Well, it's so cool, and I love the way you've brought this whole thing to a cellular level, because here's me, golf teacher, who's preached about being good golf. To me, happens at the intersection of being healthy spiritually, mentally, emotionally, and physically, and right there in the middle of that is the sweet spot. Because I'll show you countless golfers who could be playing awesome, but then the mind's off, or there's something happening at home, where they don't. It's life kind of thing, and you are essentially saying to me is like, yeah, we're taking this down even further, because if you're not breathing right, there's look, hitting the golf ball is a secondary thing. Staying alive is goal number one, really. Huh?
And you'll just be so much better at it. So the kind of two main things that I get and I think about with practicing breathing, and we can talk about what that looks like as well, practicing breathing or breath work. So improving the oxygen delivery through your body. And this, you can improve it depending on where you're currently at. Like you can improve it 25%, 50%. And you think, okay, this is my main fuel source for all the life functions of my body. If I'm just getting by right now, like what could I do with an extra 25 or 50% energy? That is a lot.
For most,
right? That's a lot.
Most folks, people pay tons of money for that sort of stuff, because how many folks don't sleep well? They wake up in the morning exhausted, and it's oxygen. Not deprivation, because they're breathing enough, as you pointed out. It's just not transmitted.
Or way more than they need.
Yeah.
So, I'm getting so it's breathing to meet the metabolic demands, as opposed to breathing in a way that's beyond the metabolic demands. That creates a dysregulated state, right? And that's why, like, if you're running, you are going to breathe more. You still should be able to breathe through your nose with control. You can tape your mouth. That helps. That's what I do when I run. But
I've seen people
breathing in such a way that I put a little piece of tape over my mouth when I run, just to make sure that my mouth is actually staying sealed and everything's coming in and out through the nose. So you keep it regulated, right? And so breathing in a way that is increasing the delivery of oxygen into the cells so that you can utilize them for whatever, whether it's for golf or running or making love or sleeping and healing, just anything, right? Like fuel. Energy is good. Use it as you will. The other thing, though, is breathing in such a way that creates coherence in your nervous system. So when you're breathing very quickly and you create a stress response, the brain kind of goes out of whack. Certain things get upregulated, certain things get downregulated, but things stop speaking to each other and behaving in a harmonious manner. So you can see this in brain scans when different parts of the brain are oscillating in a way that's entrained. So different parts of the brain are entrained with one another. They're oscillating in a way that shows that like they're actually working together. They're synced up at the same time, right? Brainwaves. When you breathe slowly, smoothly in and out through the nose, if you breathe in a coherent way, what you get is entrainment of the oscillations of your breath rhythm, your heart rate, and your brain and the different parts of your brain as well. So you're creating a state of coherence, which would feel like clarity, right? The scientific word would be like coherence.
Yeah.
The emotional word would be clarity. You feel clear. You feel calm. You feel centered. You feel present. You feel like everything's kind of okay, not discombobulated, not chaotic. Like, why does it feel like everything's chaotic? Well, maybe your brain, your operating system is working in a chaotic way right now. And it might be because of your breathing pattern. And taking this to golf as well, like I can only imagine you're in a stressful situation, you know, it's a final championship or something, a lot is on the line. You got to be really, really clear to take that shot effectively.
Yeah.
Right. And I think this is something that separates a good anything from a great anything, whether it's golf or something else. Like, can you keep yourself clear? It's not easy.
No, it certainly isn't. Goodness gracious me, Carter. I mean, I feel like we're only scratching the surface, but I feel like in that you've probably liberated a whole bunch of people already just listening to what you have to say. Because if we just get the breathing figured out, then we're on the way. So along that line, you've spoken a few times about breathe slower. You don't have to breathe in as much. I'm expecting then. So maybe a breathing exercise somebody can try just to get themselves on, please.
I'll give like a super easy one. This is one that people can do anywhere, anytime. Do it while driving, do it at the computer, do it whenever. So I call it rhythmic breathing or coherent breathing. And something I like to do is just tap my fingers as a way of kind of keeping myself centered and present. So I'll do an 8-count breath where it's inhale, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Exhale, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Inhale, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Exhale, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
I need to ask you. That was fantastic. I was more enamored by the fact that you could talk while you were breathing in and out. Because I talk.
Oh no, that was not.
I get paid to announce golf, right? And
but I got to learn that.
I have a vocal coach who talks to me always. He talks about a CLB. He goes, first off, and I can see all the time, you're in good stature. So he goes, stature. And then he goes, thank your source. And so you get into that place where he goes, don't take a breath. He goes, allow a breath. And he goes, waits for me. And then I try and breathe in. And he goes, no. He goes, allow the breath. And when I'm doing this, it takes focus. And I was watching you talk. I'm like, geez, I can't talk while I'm doing this. I'm doing this before I deliver my speech, whatever it's going to be.
Yeah. Practice helps.
Practice
practice definitely helps. And leading yoga classes and leading breath classes as well. Have to be able to continue to speak and guide the room through.
Well, you just said this. Practice helps. I'm going to contend now that folks, this is not a mandate to go and not practice golf, but this is certainly is a mandate to spend a few minutes a day working on your breathing. Would
Yeah.
you agree with me? Should we
And,
start a movement?
and a great way to add it in, like if you're already practicing golf, just right before you swing, one breath. Just every time before you swing, take one slow, conscious breath. Right? It'll be a very easy way for you to just start getting into the habit of doing so, especially if you are in like, a stressful competitive situation. It'll be there eventually automatically. Just one breath, just one breath. Like a lot can change with just one breath.
My goal, one of my resolutions for 23 and beyond, is to spend 5 minutes an hour. Just take a minute and just breathe properly.
Yeah.
Heck, I mean, it settles everything down. The clarity comes, and for me, I find it becomes a blood pressure reducing agent if you start doing that stuff, because
Carbon dioxide. Mm-hmm. Carbon dioxide is a vasodilator. It'll open up your blood vessels, which decreases blood pressure.
Wow,
it's fascinating, isn't it?
Fascinating, right? You know what? I realized too, like a personal story here. I'm sure the folks who've listened to this enough know this. I've battled blood pressure, and then I find myself breathing and panting, and I can actually feel my heart rate get faster and faster. But the more I take my time and breathe out properly, then the heart rate begins to wane. Everything just settles down, and it's almost like instead of worrying about what's going on, I'm just focusing on the proper breathing, and I guess as a result now, controlling the carbon dioxide levels.
And there's like so much going on underneath the surface with the breath. Like it's a very complex thing if you trace it from the nose to the cellular level. But I think sometimes thinking of it in like a musical way or an emotional way or an energetic way, like just watch your breath. Or if you were to like hear the person next to you breathing in this way, like what would you ask them if they're okay?
Yeah.
Right. And just you can tell based off of the way you're breathing or someone's breathing, like, am I kind of freaked out? Am I, amped up? And just smooth it down again. Every now and then I'll say something and it'll just be kind of profound and I'll run with it. Like, where did that come from? Oh, it's genius. Where did you come from?
Yeah,
and one of them.
You are very anointed right now. You're hitting us with wisdom. So go. I'll stop talking.
Life is supposed to feel good. Like just that. Life is supposed to feel good. And if you don't feel good, there's something wrong. Right. And obviously it's more complex than that. But overall, like being alive is supposed to feel good. Like you are an emotional person and you're going to experience stress and you're going to experience upsets and heartbreak. And like, definitely we are going to get old and someday we are going to die. But for the most part, like life is supposed to feel good. And when your system really is healthy and being calm is a part of health, because calm is the parasympathetic system, right? That's the emotional part of the biological system. It does feel good. It feels really good, actually. Back to this, like people are in a state and they don't necessarily know what state they're in. Like, do you feel great? Like really, really good. Do you feel that good? And like, it's okay if the answer is no. I think it's something to be like really honest with yourself. Like, do you feel how you want to feel? And if not, let's look at that.
Yeah. Well, it starts with breathing. You've helped us there. You've explained good and bad breathing patterns. You've given little marching orders for folks to take the 8 seconds. And I love the tactile nature of just touching your fingers too, because that's also being present, because so often our feet are here, but we're elsewhere. And when you start to do this, then you become where you are.
And the breath is very subtle too. The breath is subtle in the sense that you can't see it that well. And if you haven't paid that much attention to your breath right away, if I were to tell you to just like quiet your breath, you might be present with it for like half a breath and then your mind goes elsewhere. Yeah. So having this little like finger tapping thing as well, just that physical sensation, like you're watching it, I'm breathing in for 8, I'm breathing out for 8. It's like putting a stop on everything else and just doing this one thing. It helps.
Right, I've kept you for a very long time, and we haven't gotten to a couple of restorative yoga poses.
Yes.
I'm sure a lot of folks listening to, watching this are interested, never tried it, or maybe if they've tried it, they've been like me, and you go in there and you feel You'll feel aware of, very self-conscious, aware of yourself. You go into a pose, and you're like, holy cow, this is hurting, and then you don't breathe properly, and so it's a bit messy.
Mhm.
So
Yep.
could you recommend one or two poses that folks can just kind of dip their toe into the water, please?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just going to put the camera a little bit down. So both of the shapes I'm going to show are two examples of twists. Twisting, rotating is one of the most important motions in human mechanics. Really all like walking, running happens in this contralateral twisting way. When tension exists, especially in the torso, it prevents that from happening. And obviously with golf as well, like the entire power of the swing is driven by a from the bottom to the top full-bodied twist. If there's tension anywhere along those twisting lines, like it can break the natural flow of energy that would really send the ball far. So the first one is going to be a supine twist. This one's going to be super relaxed, and it's really for opening up the front body. So if you were to lie onto the ground, take your arms out to a T, bring your right knee into your chest, take a breath in, and then exhale, take the leg across your body. So it's a twist, the right leg goes out to the left, the arms tee out. You can keep the knee bent or you can extend it, and then looking over to the right. You can stay here for a minute, you could stay here for 3 minutes, and when you are here, close your eyes and watch your breath. Especially in twists, you'll find that it's easy to breathe into the belly, but it's very difficult to breathe into the rib cage and into the chest. But it's in breathing into the rib cage and the chest that you're actually going to start to make more space for the next breath. Every inhale, you're expanding, you're stretching out from this inside out pressure, you're making more space. And then every exhale, you get to fall a little bit deeper into the shape. So you can stay here right side for 3 minutes, and then switch it, take it left side for 3 minutes. So that's just a simple supine twist, right? It'll be really good, one, for like opening up those rotational motions, as well. It's going to be really good for making more space in the lungs as well. Also good for strengthening the diaphragm because you're breathing into resistance. The other one's a closed twist. So a closed twist is going to feel a little bit different. I bring my right foot up and over my left thigh. So there's kind of a cross leg action happening here. And then my left arm up and around outside the thigh. So it's a closed twist because my belly is connected to my leg. There's no space between the two. It creates a compression. This has other health benefits to it as well. The left hand could be at heart with the right hand behind. A little bit deeper, the left hand could hold on to the foot. A bound version, a little bit more intense. If you were to bind it around the left thigh, and then looking over the right shoulder. So looking over the right shoulder, it's going to take your spine and twist it 180 degrees from the pelvis to the skull. One of the benefits of a closed twist is it's going to make a lot more space in the rib cage. There's all that pressure down in the belly, so there's not really anywhere in the belly to breathe into. This is going to force you to find other places to breathe into, specifically opening up and loosening the rib cage. And again, you would do right side and then left side. That one, maybe hold it for 30 seconds or a minute. That one's not as restorative as to just lie down and let gravity do the work. Supine twist, but it'll be a little bit different, the effect.
Carter, this has been absolutely tremendous. And you've given people plenty to go and work on. Breathe properly, try those two twists. They are very golf specific. I will say that and that's a bad.
I got you.
But it's life more importantly, and golf secondarily. So with that, I'm sure there are going to be people that are interested. So help them find you. Social media, websites, if they want to. I know you do consultations and you give lessons. So please share all of the details.
Yeah, fantastic. So Carter Miles Yoga, that's the name for all the things. For my Instagram is Carter Miles Yoga, and my website is also Carter Miles Yoga. I have 2 online training programs on my website. Both are pre-recorded video trainings. One is fascia release. So it's just using a lacrosse ball and getting into as many different spots as you can to release tension with a lacrosse ball from home. It's a really, really great practice to just incorporate into whatever else that you're doing. It could be like 10 minutes a day. You could spend an hour with it, just getting into your body. It makes a huge difference. The other training is a breath training. So that is a 30-day breath training program designed to really specifically teach you slowly and deliberately how to breathe, build up your respiratory muscles, releasing the tension, and then give you breathing techniques or breath work tools. So there's a lot of different breathing patterns that you can work with if you want more energy, if you're trying to meditate, calm yourself down. So those would be the two online training programs that I have pre-recorded available on my website. And then also on my website, people can reach out to me directly. So I do one-on-one work for people that is breath and body restoration. And I've worked with people from a variety of positions that are like professional athletes or like almost in a wheelchair. No matter where you are, like the purpose of yoga is to create greater harmony in your mind-body system. And so regardless of the position, like we can take the next few steps from that position. It's just going to look different what the practice is like. So people feel free to please reach out to me via my website. We can schedule a consultation, just talk a little bit about what it would look like.
There's no better time to start than now, is there?
Nope. No.
Hey, you're the best, man. I love the content you're putting out. I hope lots of folks come and seek you out. I'm going to have to get you on this again because I feel like we've just kind of scratched the surface and a lot of folks are interested. Thank you. I really appreciate your time and more importantly, your insight. I appreciate you joining us.
Thank you. I'd love to be on the podcast again. You just let me know. And thank you everyone who's been listening. I hope you got something out of our conversation today.